So this has to be the first classic movie that you've chosen that you enjoy, I think.
No, It's a Wonderful Life. How dare you?
Oh, I you know what? I did forget that one. But for the most part, you choose them to tear them down. Yeah?
Well, I do enjoy destroying people's childhood classic movies that are terrible. That is entirely fair.
You do. But because this is a classic movie, it's made it on a bunch of lists.
Yep.
And there's a other classic movie who has beat this movie on every list that I think you hate. Or you hate in theory, at least. Okay?
Okay.
So, there's two lists that I'm going to bring up. I'm going to tell you the spot that this one is on. And the other movie is number 1 on both. Okay? And you need to tell me what the movie is.
Number 1 on both.
And now, I as I'm saying, you either dislike the movie or you dislike it in theory. But I know for a fact you dislike it. Okay?
Okay.
So, use that knowledge. So...
Do I get a genre for the movie?
Well, yes, because one of the lists is genre. So
Okay.
you do. Okay, so this movie,
Yep.
and for everybody who's listening, the movie that we chose was 12 Angry Men, and we did the original.
The original.
Okay, so this movie is number 2 on AFI, American Film Institute's list for the courtroom drama genre.
So
this is number 2. So the other movie is number 1. Okay? So
okay.
wait.
So it's a courtroom movie.
Now this movie, as in 12 Angry Men, is number 28 on the list of 50 greatest movie heroes. The other movie is number 1. What movie am I referring to?
I honestly have no idea.
So, courtroom genre.
Yeah, I got
and
that.
film hero.
Tom Cruise in...
It's an old movie.
Oh, it's an old movie.
Yeah.
Because I was going to do the You Can't Handle the Truth.
Okay. Old movie. Which I would have added to the list, although I know you will not watch it. Or you will complain the entire time.
I mean, either one.
Sounds delightful. You're right.
I honestly have no idea.
It is To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch.
Ah.
Now, was I right in the fact that you either don't like it or don't like it in theory?
I did not particularly care for the book, no.
Yeah. So there you are. I wanted to watch it when I saw that was number 1 on courtroom genres because, as we know, I love courtroom movies.
Yeah.
But anyway, I thought that was a fun little exercise.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I wanted everyone to know all the classics that you hate, just so that they can attack you. So anytime I get a chance, I gotta let that in there.
Figures.
So anyways, before we really dive into this movie, did you have a beer this week?
I do have a beer. It's Briefcase Porter by Exhibit A.
Ooh, more things you're gonna hate.
I
love this episode already.
I'm going to hate this beer.
You are.
Two.
I'm so excited for this. It's probably gonna be thick and disgusting. Okay,
Tastes
you didn't have the worst face.
Tastes like coffee.
I mean, you like coffee.
Yeah,
You just don't like coffee beer.
No, it's not good. But
what was the reason you chose that beer?
Well, it's Exhibit A.
Well, so
And
Exhibit A is Exhibit A.
Briefcase Porter, in terms of lawyer's briefcase, that was the only one that was even remotely close. The other ones were random.
You had other options, but they might come in later because we do courtroom movies. So let's not let that cat out of the bag. But there were other options. They weren't close,
Close but no cigar.
Yeah, basically.
All right, so going into brief synopsis then, right?
Brief synopsis.
I mean, do you got one? This is going to be nerve-wracking.
The movie centers around 12 jurors deciding the fate of one person on trial for first-degree murder. Henry Fonda is the lone holdout at the start of the movie.
Right.
And then he, over the course of the movie, convinces every one of the other jurors that there is reasonable doubt, so they acquit. That's basically the movie.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, anyways, we should probably get into the IMDb characters.
Yes. So first is Henry Fonda.
Which is Henry Fonda. I think this is our first Henry Fonda?
I believe so, yeah.
Which we should do more. So if anybody has suggestions, I mean, I wrote down a lot of things from this movie. I'm just going to let you know. Yeah, Henry Fonda is part of it. So he basically plays a lone holdout. I mean, you knew this from the start of the movie because he wore a white suit.
Yeah,
so,
he was clearly in white for the pure of heart character. And he wins people over one at a time.
Right. And his whole premise for this movie is it's possible, basically.
Well, it's just you shouldn't be so flippant and casual with someone's life. Like, you have a very serious responsibility to get things right. So there's no harm in taking some time.
Exactly. Okay. So, Henry Fonda actually happens to also be my GG reference.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now this is complicated, but bear with me because it's a really old movie and I didn't have a choice. Okay, so in one of the Gilmore Girls episodes, Emily, which is Lorelai's mother, is looking in the fridge and she says, it's like the grapes of wrath, referring to their fridge because there's nothing in there. And Grapes of Wrath was directed by John Ford, but starring Henry Fonda.
Ah.
So here we go. I was so lucky to get one, so like I was really proud of it. Now I could have also gone a different way, but I had already used this previously. But I think 8 of the actors in this movie starred also in The Twilight Zone, and as I mentioned previously, Rory was gifted a rocket by Logan, and it was a reference to Twilight Zone. So there you go. You're welcome.
Great. So the next one on the list, who are you going to go with?
Well, so we can go in order of juror if you want, but like they're not... Okay, they're all wonderful actors. I don't want anyone to attack me. But they're not all necessarily ones we need to talk about in depth because they will come up later in the discussions. So It's up to you, really, if you want to...
Well, so right off the bat, Martin Balsam, juror number 1, the foreman.
Balsam or bomb? Do we know?
I don't know.
We don't know. I mean, Wonder Bomb is something we use a lot and it's spelt the same way, but also I don't know. So
but it's the guy's
don't come
name.
for us, we don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Go ahead. What about him?
So he's my Lord of the Rings reference, actually.
Of course. I knew that was why we were picking him. I'm like, why? Because he's the foreman? What else do you got there? But he is the foreman, just in case you guys don't know.
Yes. So he was in Silence of the Hams.
This sounds like a movie I need to see, just for the name.
It is a spoof of a spoof movie, basically.
So something you would hate. I'm down. I'm in.
With John Astin. Now, John Astin is the adopted father of Sean Astin, who is Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings. Also, his granddaughter is in Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. John Astin, the father, was in The Frighteners, directed by Peter Jackson.
This was a lot.
Yeah.
My brain has just turned off. That was a lot of...
Circular.
Yes, sir, yeah. But we got there, and I'm proud of us because it was a really old movie. And all of the actors, unfortunately, have passed away in this movie. So... Oh, what we didn't mention, since you brought up children, is Jane Fonda is actually Henry Fonda's daughter.
Correct.
So I do think they had other, the grandkids, and also Jane Fonda's brother is famous, but I mean, if you don't know who Jane Fonda is, you'll see a picture of her and you will recognize her. I promise you that.
Well, absolutely.
So, wanted to mention that. The other juror that I wanted to mention, not because of the movie itself, but because, is John Field Ler. He plays juror number 2, and he was the voice of Piglet.
Yes, and for those of you who don't know, my wife is rather obsessed with collecting Eeyores.
Me?
They're everywhere in our house, yes.
I don't know what you're referring to, actually, but I just thought it was really cute because, people know who Piglet is.
There's probably 8 or 10 scattered around the first floor of this house, and then hundreds in the basement.
Okay, well, anyways, point being, now, juror number 7, he looks awfully familiar. He was the father in a Sandra Bullock movie that we did while you were sleeping.
Ah.
Oh, no, it wasn't the father. It was the guy that walked into the room
the
and
friend
sold
or the
her out.
Friend, yeah.
Yeah, that's who he was.
I believe his name is Jack Warden.
Yes, that is correct. It was born John Warden.
Ah.
So.
I mean, anyway. the only other juror that is important is the horrible juror that is kind of a dick for the whole movie.
I think it's Lee Cobb.
Yes. So he's just juror number 3. He's just an insufferable ass for the whole movie and yells at everyone for not convicting a possibly innocent kid.
Yes.
Based off of his horrible relationship with his son and his own personal bias and prejudice.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, that's that on the characters. Obviously, if you guys are really into older movies, and you're probably going to know a lot of these actors, a lot of them are award winners, and they're in a lot of great films. And I do kind of want to do some of the older films that really focus on acting, because I feel like I would really enjoy the character development in that, and less CGI and all that kind of stuff. So I do want to do some, but right now I don't have a good basis, so we don't have a lot to say about those. But maybe we will in the future.
Well, I have a few of them on my list, so.
I've got a nice little list right here. Don't you worry.
Oh,
they're not all old either. Anyway, so before we get into, whether or not we think they did it and bias and all of that, because we know we're on different sides of the fence on some of these things, I do think we should talk about the legal issues of what Henry Fonda's character did.
Yes, he definitely did not follow the instructions from the judge.
Right. So do you want to explain that a little bit?
So he buys the exact same knife as the murder weapon at a store in the kid's neighborhood, proving that it's not a one-of-a-kind, which is one of the pivotal scenes because it wins over a couple people based off that.
Right.
You are not allowed, as a juror, to do your own independent research. You're not supposed to look at any of the newspaper articles or any of the...
Or go to the scene at all.
Go to the scene of the crime, do anything that was not presented at the trial.
Right.
To try to not unduly influence you and sway your decision based off of that information rather than what was presented in the trial.
Right. You are really not supposed to use any kind of information that was not presented at trial, even if you have personal knowledge. You're technically not supposed to do that. Now, we'll go into the ins and outs of how possible that is, given that we are human. But you are not supposed to do that. Now, have you ever been on a jury?
I have not. I've been called a few times, and I've sat in the room waiting to be called, but I've never actually served.
Well, it's an interesting experience, to say the least. Now, I will say, obviously, I've been on a jury, but it was not a murder trial. I don't think I could handle a murder trial. I'm going to say that right now. The way that this one played out, I have to say, would be probably a lot quicker and a lot less contentious than I would expect a real one to play out, only because, one, at least nowadays, I don't know if it was the same back then, but they sequester you, so you're going to be in a hotel, so you cannot see your family. I think they do allow you to use your cell phone, but I don't know. I've never been on it. I know, like, when the Whitey Bulger thing happened near us, they were, like, cut off from the outside world.
Well, you're allowed to speak to them. I don't think they're allowed to use a cell phone because that has access to internet, but I think you're allowed to call your family and talk to them as long as they're...
And I believe it's monitored.
Yes.
I believe if you are seen, saying, oh, this happened at court today and blah, 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 you are kicked off. So all of that kind of stuff has to be super difficult nowadays. So I can only imagine. But anyways, I was on one, and I have to say it is very similar in that people come in with their own bias. Yep. And it is very difficult to be the person that does not agree. I, unfortunately, did not have the backbone that Henry Fonda did, and I did end up giving in eventually. I did get the charges lowered for the person. It was a very simple thing. It was just a motor vehicle accident, but he was being... Basically, they wanted him to pay for the woman's surgery and all of that. They did present evidence that she has done this multiple times in the past. They proved that it was not... She said he hit the gas hit her car, where he says he rolled into it because he had a standard. They proved that there was no damage to either car because they had experts showing that. They also proved that the speed at which he hit the car, based on the way things happened and based on what she said her injuries would not be possible that he hit the gas. Just wouldn't be possible. Also the distance. All of these things, but people went into it. Literally, the first thing that said when they sat down, a few of the jurors, which were older women, said, "Oh, I know how kids drive. Obviously, he did it."
Well, it's very much like the start of this whole conversation. Well, kids these days, or he's from a bad neighborhood, so obviously,
right.
Those people, which is prejudiced and racist and horrible.
Right, horrible. So, I mean, ours took a week, I believe. And now we didn't stay overnight. It was 8-hour days, and it was a week. And it's tough. It's really tough to stay in there and keep going. Ours was also in the summer, so we had air conditioning, thank the Lord. But it's tough, and it's tough to hold out when you just don't know if those other people are going to break. So it's, I don't know. Murder trial, I don't know. Would you ever do a murder trial?
I mean, I like to think that I would be fair and reasonable in my deliberation and give the person all due consideration based off the facts of the case. I don't know. It
would definitely be tough. There's been some high profile cases in the area, and I'm not going to say what because I know people disagree with me strongly, but been high profile cases in our area that I looked at and I was like, there's no way I could sentence that person to death. I just couldn't do it. So very difficult. But before we get into biases, because it's going to take us forever, should we talk about cinematography? We don't do it a lot. People do like it.
We don't talk about that, even though we are a film podcast, which is odd. This movie, there was not a whole lot of special effects other than camera angles and framing the shots. But it is a stunningly shot movie, in my opinion. It does a very good job of giving you the impression of being claustrophobic in an enclosed space with all of these sweaty, smelly...
Except for one. He doesn't sweat, remember? Yeah. So he's me.
Well, it was very good in portraying the gritty reality of 12 guys in a room arguing, because that's what the movie is. Mm-hmm. And just it goes from an overhead shot down to eye level, down to below, just close-up shots. And
they also use, I think, wide-angle lenses and things like that.
In some of the shots.
I really enjoy that kind of stuff. Now, that's part of the reason I want to watch older movies, because I think they did a much better job at focusing on that kind of thing, because I think now it's so focused on, the biggest and best effects, and really, I would like to see more, realistic.
Well, it's gotten to the point where actors can be a little bit lazy. Don't worry about it. We'll fix it with computers.
Yeah, we'll change it in post. It's fine. And it's just... these type of movies really rely on that great acting, and this movie delivered that. I was very nervous sitting down to a black and white film, especially a black and white film all filmed in one room, because I get bored easy. Yeah. And this is one movie that I very rarely picked up my phone. I can't say I never did, because that's not even a possible thing to happen. But I mean, in the grand scheme of picking up my phone during a movie, this one, no. I paid attention, and that's impressive for me. So.
Well, I think it was partly due to the character development. You saw the person for who they were, and you felt like they were real people, right, rather than just thrown a character into the movie. Like some of the other movies we've done recently, like the Wrong Missy or The Other Woman. There's no real character. There's no
right. Real... They're stereotypes.
Exactly.
And these are people and characters, and it's very interesting to see them grow and develop, even in a small microcosm of a thing here. But anyway, bias. This is gonna be the bulk of everything, because I think this is a very hard thing to talk about, and it's very hard to figure out what you would do in this situation. So first of all, if you had to pick a juror out of the 12 that you think most like, or you would think most like in that situation, who do you think it would be?
I mean,
not altruistically.
Two on the nose, it would have to be for me the stockbroker.
Because you're a stockbroker?
Well, I am a stockbroker. I think that's more coincidence than anything.
Right.
But I am, by most accounts, fairly reasonable in how my brain works. And I'm a very logical, step-by-step person, where I go from point A to point B in a methodical fashion, mm-hmm, and I'm meticulous in that fashion. But I also do have the ability to admit when I'm wrong.
Right.
So when I experience someone that has a better argument or understands more of the nuance to the circumstance than I do, I very often will adapt and change my opinion on something.
Right. Which
is very hard these days for people. It's most people. It's the tribal mentality of it. This is who I am as a person, so I can't back off of my idea, right, even if it's wrong.
Right.
And it's just, you have to let go of that. You have to adapt and change. That's just life and being a better person.
I agree with that. So, because you picked him, I did want to ask you about one scene that I think if anybody were to pick apart these characters, the scene that they would say was the most damning for that character would be the scene where he was caught playing bingo. Or tic-tac-toe. I'm sorry, it was tic-tac-toe. Now...
He was not caught playing tic-tac-toe. The other jurors, he was paying attention, but he was paying attention.
Okay, so he was enjoying tic-tac-toe going on around him.
He was indulging the conversation even though he had already made up his mind.
Right.
So he was very much of I'm going to pretend to pay attention while other things are going on.
Now, do you think you would do that? Because I have my own opinion.
Honestly, and it's something that I would have to work on. I do have a tendency to disregard people and offhand.
It's not a bad thing to admit that we all have bias. I think that's perfectly fine to admit. I think that it's good that you can see that and you can recognize it on a film, which I think 99.9% of people cannot do.
Yeah.
So I think that's good.
I just personal experience, I do have a tendency to brush off people's opinions, especially if I feel like they have arrived at that decision without considering all of the facets of the argument.
Right.
If you just have that opinion, I'm going to just disregard whatever you say.
Right, they need to prove themselves to you. And that's valid. That's fair. Anyway, so
who would you be?
See, obviously, altruistically, I want to say I would be Henry Fonda. Now, there are bad sides to that, and I've experienced those bad sides in my life. So, I mean, if you look at this movie, you're going to say, okay, so he's amazing. He's so willing to listen to all sides that he hears everything. But if you look at the negative side of this film and the negative commentary, people are saying, well, but he just let a murderer go free, and that is actually possible. He may have. We don't know if they did it or not. So, while I think I do think that way, I think I do go into every situation not without a bias, but without a opinion. I won't go into a situation saying, okay, well, I know this, so obviously they did it. I don't do that. I tend to be like, okay, well, explain to me why. Give me your story. And I do that in everything. But it leads to giving the benefit of the doubt to those who don't deserve it.
Right.
Because you have to prove to me you're a bad person before I will believe you are a bad person. Even if every red flag tells me you are, I need proof. Solid, irrefutable proof. Just like he did.
Yep.
And that's not great. So I don't want anyone to be like, oh, well, she's trying to, be like, oh, she's wonderful. It's not a wonderful quality, I promise you.
While you do think that way, I would say that you're probably more in line with the old man juror.
Oh, I love him so much. He's so
sweet. In that you argue the same way, because you will force me to say the thing that you want me to say, and you've already mapped out the entire argument 20 minutes before we have the argument. And
yeah, so I can get you to do what I want. And then you can be like, see?
It's insufferable. It's so insufferable.
I mean, I'll take that.
Oh, do you normally wear your glasses to bed? No one wears their glasses to bed. Of course they don't.
And then you just wait.
Yeah.
You don't wear your glasses to bed? Funny. And you wait for the wheels to turn, and then, You
wait for the person to catch up to where you arrived 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, their eyes light up, and you're like, oh, what is that? What happened? You look like something changed. Yeah, I don't do that at all. Never done that. I like that. I'll go with that. But, Anyway, so I don't want anyone to think that that's a tooting your own horn thing. There's problems with thinking that way. So, bias.
Yes.
So in this movie, we have to talk about bias on both sides. And I don't want to sound like, there are good people on all sides. If you know that reference, it's not a great one. I don't mean it that way. But Henry Fonda's character, as well as all of the other jurors, have different biases. Whether they're good or bad, there are biases. And
right.
How do you deal with that in a jury room? And what is legal? And honestly, I will say, before we get into it, I don't have a solid answer. And I don't know if there is a solid answer.
Well, so the two negative, or the biggest negative influences on the jury were jury number 3, which is the guy that screamed at everyone and was just a dick because he was a shitty father, and he goes into it thinking his son would kill him.
Right.
And then juror number 10, the racist ass face. Like
right.
Just the guy who goes on a 10-minute racist tirade and they all shun him, which was delightful.
And that was a very powerful... Okay, so let's talk about that to start with the bias. So, racial bias. Now, we're in a time right now that racial bias is top of mind. I will say.
Yes.
So with everything going on, I think it's easy to say that even now, racial bias is going to come into the courtroom, whether it's right or wrong.
Well, it's definitely wrong.
What I mean by right or wrong is, do people sometimes go in now saying, well, I don't want to judge because they are insert race here, when maybe you should be judging because like all of the facts are there. Like, are we afraid to judge now? I think that it's going on both ways now.
Well, it's one of the things that I liked about this movie is they didn't necessarily pinpoint a specific minority.
Right, I was actually wrong in the minority of the person. I wanted to guess because I wanted to see what the prejudice was, and I wrote down what I thought, and I was wrong based on what I read and research. So they did a good job of that.
So I think that was, intentionally done so that it was a more timeless movie, because you can insert any kind of persecuted minority into that category, whether it's Black, Latino, Italian Americans, Irish,
Puerto Rican,
gay.
There's a billion of them. So
it's any minority you can think of that is a persecuted minority. Exactly.
I mean, you can't put women because it was a band, but I mean, I'm sure in a remake they could put a woman. I mean, you could do whatever you want.
It lends to a more poignant reminder of things that are problematic in our society, because you can extrapolate it for any circumstance.
Right. So, for anybody who's curious, the race of the actor, anyways, was Italian.
Yes.
So, I had originally thought Latino was my guess. I was incorrect. But I basically guessed that just because, I mean, the movie is in black and white, so you're not going to get skin tone there. And it's a young kid, so there's no facial hair, there's no really defining characteristics at all to go with.
And you only see the actual defendant for the first 2 seconds of the movie.
Right. But the person who was racist was very racist. But my question also was he also classist? No, because he wasn't the one that brought up classism, I don't believe. But more and more that he spoke, I was wondering, like, in his racist tirade, if that was also convoluted with it.
I think that was tied into his prejudice. So he was talking about they live in the slums, and they don't have the same cares for human life, and they lie. That's just what they do. It was just all those horrible, ignorant comments that are still around. That just, we need to be better about crushing that out of people.
Right. So in a jury room especially, it doesn't matter your experience with, I'm going to put it air quotes, those people, as he said. That doesn't matter. You should never look at someone and be like, I've experienced X, Y, and Z with that nationality, that gender, that religion, that whatever. You should never do that. It should always be about the person sitting in front of you and the facts that you were given. Like, that's it. But it was very clear he could not do that. But it was very powerful how everybody, including the worst character in the movie, reacted to that. Yeah. I mean, so each person, one by one, got up and turned around. And it was just like the perfect example of how you should react in that situation.
Well, it's you don't give them the solidarity. You don't give them the feeling of being accepted for that opinion, and no recognition at all, and they're going to wind themselves down and realize they are the problem. They are in the wrong. If you don't yell at them, then they're going to be the asshole, because they're the one that is saying the horrible things. You haven't reacted, and you have the moral high ground. You have the moral high ground anyway, but it's more stark. It's more significant of a difference.
Yeah. Now, there was one person that did stay. I don't remember which juror number he was, but he stayed and he waited and faced him the whole time. And then the guy said, "Why aren't you listening to me?" And he said, "I am listening to you. Now sit down and don't talk again." Yeah. And he didn't for the rest of the film, except for, I think, when he said not guilty.
He shook his head. He didn't even speak.
So he didn't even speak.
He did not speak again for the movie.
That's powerful. I think it's powerful to show how if we don't give a platform to those who spew that disgusting hate, how their voice is no longer heard and they become almost insignificant. And that's needed. That those people that speak that kind of hate, they deserve that until they prove themselves otherwise. I believe in growth. But he didn't have time to grow in that moment. So that was the perfect way to deal, I believe.
Well, he did kind of grow in terms of accepting that he was biased by his being so shamed in that moment.
Right, and that his voice was not needed.
Right. So it was all about that. And then you have the guy talking down to the juror that grew up in that same type of neighborhood. And you're like, I have personal experience that I can draw from. I've seen a knife fight several times.
Right.
And that's not what it looks like. That's not what someone who is familiar with using a knife would do.
Right.
Which you're also not supposed to do. But
yeah, so let's talk about the bias of the evidence, I guess. So in the way that Henry Fonda thinks, I can say from my experience that you tend to want to give everything a benefit of the doubt to the point of, did it deserve it? Like, are you picking it apart too much? And that's kind of a question that I think everybody has with this movie that criticize the movie. So, for example, we'll start with what you just mentioned, the switchblade. So, I don't remember the name, which juror it was, but the juror that was, this sounds horrible, but they said he was from the slums. He said he has been in a knife fight before. He's used a switchblade before, and you don't stab downwards if you're shorter than the person. Now, you're not allowed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. But my question comes in with, if he knows that, right? He knows that you don't do that, and from personal experience, and he sees that, that's probable or doubt.
Reasonable
doubt. How do you not use that is what I want to know. Because you're not allowed to, but then how do you not?
I honestly don't know, because each piece of evidence was presented as ironclad initially, and they poke holes in it and they pick at it and they...
Right. And you as a juror are not allowed to do any of that. You're not allowed to speak during the trial. You don't get to ask your questions. None of that.
You are allowed to argue over the facts of the case in the room and go over the evidence that was presented and whether or not you are extrapolating and making a reasonable determination based off the facts of the case.
Right.
That's what the whole jury system is about. But you're supposed to be removed from your own personal life.
Right. Now, I do believe in a real murder trial. I'm not 100% sure, so if you guys are lawyers or know people that are, you could let us know. But I believe in a real murder, if you didn't believe the angle was possible, like you said, you know what, it doesn't even matter if you had personal... I'm 5 foot tall, you're 6'2". I can't stab you down in your chest. I can't. So I think in a real jury, you can say, we have a question about the angle, and then the lawyers have a chance to address it. I believe that in a real thing, you can present questions and say we have questions about this stuff we don't understand, and I believe the lawyers are able to address it. I don't exactly know how that works, but I think that's probably what they would have had to do here is write it all down and say, we have a question about this, because you can't just be well, I mean, that doesn't work. That's not how that works. That's not how a switchblade works. That's not how, you don't switch hands. That's not how it works.
Switchblades were designed for fast and quick use. It's a click and a stab.
Right. So you can't just look at that and be like, that's not how that works, but okay, sure, that's what he did.
It could be how that happened. We don't know either way.
But that's still doubt.
That is possible, but possible is not reasonable doubt.
Right, to send somebody to an electric chair.
Yeah.
So there's a few other things that he brought to the attention. I think one of the other ones was the old man walked with a limp. And he said that he got to the door in 15 seconds. So they acted it out, right? They mapped out the amount of feet, and then they measured how long it took to walk with a limp that far. And according to everything on the internet, that is not allowed. You're not allowed to conduct your own independent research. But would you be able to say, I just don't believe he could have done that? I have doubt on whether or not he could have possibly done that, so I don't believe he could have seen the person.
Well, that's where the gray area is. How removed do you have to be from your own research? Obviously, you can't buy the knife and bring it into the courthouse. You can't do those certain things, but where is that line? You can't
But if I don't believe it, if I look at the person, I go, but there's no way he did that. I don't believe that. Then where do I have doubt now? So where does that line stop?
So I don't know where the line is for making your own determinations. There were just so many holes because you're not allowed to make an assumption. You're not allowed for the eyewitness testimony. You're not allowed to assume that she wasn't wearing her glasses in bed, even though no one wears their glasses to bed.
You can't. You break your glasses. Your glasses would be bent.
Well, it's just you are not allowed to make that judgment. If she says she saw it, you have no way to disprove that she in fact saw it.
But don't they consider testimony like that hearsay? Or no?
Well, hearsay is a conversation that you are telling secondhand.
That's true. That's true.
So, it just eyewitness testimony is notoriously flawed. So, our brains
and some people pay for them.
Pay for expert testimony, and you can say whatever you want. You can say that sugary sodas aren't tied to obesity. Are you kidding me? Of course they are.
Right.
It's just people's brains work in a way where they piece things together. If they have an incomplete picture, your brain is going to try its best to fill in the picture with things that it's familiar with, even if that's not what actually happened.
Right.
And there have been numbers of studies, quite a few of them, just explaining that it's in a fallible, not perfect system.
Right. I mean, there's even been instances where, say, for example, a woman is attacked sexually or violently. Either way, they see his face. They see it. And then they're asked to identify him later. And they misidentify the person. One, trauma. So it blurs everything. And two, it's a lot of times in the moment, you might see something, but you're focused so much on the horrible thing that is happening to you right now that you don't really register every feature of a person. And if you don't know someone, it can kind of mix in with a bunch of other people you don't know.
Well, you don't see the forest through the trees. You don't see you see...
Right. I know it was a tall, big man. Do I know what his race, his nationality, what color hair he had, what color eyes he had? No, probably not. I probably didn't. I focused on, I want to get out. I didn't focus on his details. I should, but I probably don't.
Well, it's just not remembering the movie you go to. Your memory is not perfect. It's not going to, in times of stress, be able to remember specific details necessarily.
Right. I mean, that was one of the things brought up in the movie, was the movie he went to. So he said he went to they said it was 2 movies. It's kind of like The Drive-In, right? Is it similar?
Well, so back then they would have the primary movie you're going to see, and then they would have a second feature that's just an add-on movie kind of deal.
Right.
But it's just one of those things where I don't remember what I ate for breakfast last week, and that doesn't mean I didn't eat breakfast last week. That's just I don't happen to remember on that specific day. Right.
Now, I will say the one thing that was a little bit, I guess, not something I related to is I tend to remember a movie or things like that when something traumatic happens on that day more. Like, I will be able to say, like, on this day, I watched this movie because this happened on that day. So I know it was that movie because I remember ingrained in my mind, like, when that horrible thing happened to me, this is the movie I just saw. Where on a regular day, like, what did I watch last week on Monday?
No idea.
I mean, I assume we watched Boy Meets World, but really, I mean, we could have watched...
Probably.
How to Get Away with Murder. We could have watched...
West Wing.
I don't know. I genuinely do not know.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing that was kind of like, well, but wouldn't he have remembered that if something bad happened? But also, if he didn't do it and nothing bad happened, to him it was a normal night. He was getting abused all the time.
Well, it's not even that. You're being interviewed with your dead father in the next room.
Oh, that's awful. That should never be allowed.
Wait, that's just... I'm going to be distracted by that and half paying attention because I'm like,
there's blood. That is my dad. So I might not have liked him, but that is also my dad. So
he's the one connection I have to the world, and he did pay the bills, and he was a horrible person, but I'm alone now.
Right.
Like, those are huge things that are going to be drawing your focus, and you're not.
Also, I might be going to jail for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That might weigh on you. It might.
Exactly. So there's just it's none of the story held up, even if it's entirely possible, if not probable, that he did in fact kill his father.
Right.
It's the old saying, it's better 100 guilty men go free than one innocent man go to prison, because that's the system that we believe in. We believe that everyone has the right to a fair trial. We believe that everyone has the right to be innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
So that is part of the American dream. And the immigrant person on the jury, the watchmaker, had a very great speech about that, talking about this the greatest part of democracy, how we 12 people that have never met this boy, have no interest in one outcome over another, we are the ones that are going to decide this, because that is the fairest system that we have.
Right. I agree with that. 100%.
And that's actually one of the driving factors between got one of our current Supreme Court justices to pursue a career in law. Sonia Sotomayor gave a presentation, I believe it was at Fordham University, after watching this movie, that this was an inspiration for her to pursue a legal career, because it's a great idea, and it's a wonderful moment to collectively come together to just fairly judge someone. Right. with no ties to it, no benefit or loss to either outcome. It's just, you're supposed to be the final arbiter of the truth.
Right. So, with all that said,
yes,
I think we should also acknowledge that the legal system has come a long way in not so good of a way also, but both ways. So we haven't come a long way in being able to push aside our bias, for sure. But we have made scientific advances to make that a lot, make cases more ironclad. So we have DNA now. Now, I don't know exactly where DNA was at the point of the 50s. I genuinely do not know. But based on the fact that there was no mention of DNA evidence, I'm going to go with it probably wasn't a thing.
No.
Because if this case was presented right now with the evidence given, it's circumstantial evidence, and they couldn't. You need to have something tying that person to a crime scene now. Whether it be a fingerprint, which they said there were none. He wiped it down. Whether it be DNA, which is what we want. We want DNA, because that is hard, fast proof that they did it. Now, that's tough when this is a relative. He lived in that house. So it's going to have to be DNA on like blood.
He cut his finger.
It can't be like he has a hair near the body. Well, I mean, he lives there. You could have hair. I mean, there
was also eyewitness testimony, which is still accepted in every court in the country, to my understanding, even if it's imperfect.
I don't know, honestly. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. We should ask your lawyer families if that. But I do think that DNA is much more secure and feels much better. I don't know about ballistics either, how that was back then, but they didn't mention anything about, like, I don't know if that stuff works with, like, knives and stuff, but, like, angles and all that kind of stuff. There's experts for that now. I don't know.
Well, there are experts to determine the probability of handedness in terms of right-handed, left-handed, whether or not a person a specific height could inflict those wounds. They do have those. We watched
the staircase or something, and they talked about like the angle at which he fell down the stairs.
Right.
And if anybody's not seen that, it's a documentary on Netflix, and it's a very similar thing where there's a lot of bias going into it. Nobody liked this man. He was a white rich man, so they all hated him. Author, I believe.
Yes.
But basically, the experiments were done with the he did it type mentality.
Well, it was
he may have done it. I don't even think we found out. Did we find out?
I don't think he did it personally, but the forensic experts that they drew on that case went into it with a conclusion, and they backed out the evidence to match their conclusion, which is the exact opposite of good science experimentation.
Right.
So you go into it as a blank canvas, and you get the results that you get, and then you have to figure out how that works. Not, well, this is what I think happened. What can we do to get that?
Right.
Which is not fair.
Right. So, along with that, what I was going to say is we have been watching a TV show that shows us that although things are meant to be unbiased, lawyers have, I assume always, been privy to the fact that there are loopholes in everything. And there are ways to manipulate a situation. So we've been watching How to Get Away with Murder, and the reason I bring it up is because one of the things that the attorney, the main one, Professor Keating, is very good at is realizing where there's a problem in a likely or definitely guilty person's case, and she's able to manipulate that, whether she, plants evidence, which is definitely illegal, but also just by manipulating a story to fit her narrative so that there's no longer doubt, because she's now made it so that you listen to this witness.
She wants doubt because reasonable doubt you can't convict based off reasonable doubt that what they're saying is not possible.
Right. She also uses her boyfriend / cop to validate a lot of things, and she also screws him over in the process doing this a lot.
Yes.
But things like that also make this very difficult, because what it shows is that somebody who is in that position has access to people, so they're able to manipulate a situation just by the people that are around them.
Yeah.
And they also are able to, they know all the laws and they know all the things that are going to be brought up, so they can kind of close out loopholes that are not really supposed to be closed out. Maybe there really is a hole in that story because life isn't perfect and not everything is tied in a bow.
That's a whole part of our system, because it's set up so that the prosecutors have an uphill climb, because it shouldn't just be a foregone conclusion that you are guilty.
Right. Burden of proof is always on the prosecution.
The burden of all proof is on the prosecution for that reason. They don't want the state to have the ability to just send people to prison that they don't like.
Right.
So that was enshrined in our Constitution by our founding fathers, because that's such a huge concern, is that the possibility for abuse is just so overpowering at times that you have to remove any possibility that can be used against people across the country.
Right. So it's a very complicated system, and I think this movie does a really good job of showing how difficult it really is to be in a room like that and have to make those kind of decisions.
Yes.
But that's everything I wanted to go over, but I know you have other things because you love this movie.
I do love this movie. Let's see here. It was interesting that the director, this is his directorial debut for movies.
Okay.
That's a hell of a start
for
your first movie. It's Sidney Lumet,
okay.
I believe.
French?
What's Lumet? So it's either Lumet or Lumet.
Oh, okay.
And he was brought in by Henry Fonda, who is a producer on this movie.
Which he will never be a producer again after this movie. That's what he said after.
It was interesting that the director had them all cooped up together doing lines without filming for 2 weeks just to get them used to hating each other.
I can't even imagine.
Well, so that's been done in other movies. Saving Private Ryan is an example of that, where everyone except Matt Damon was put through a rigorous boot camp.
Yeah, we mentioned that in that episode.
Yeah, and then he was brought in so that after the fact, so that they would all hate him because he just showed up and did his lines.
Right.
This movie apparently failed to make a profit, so Henry Fonda never got paid for this movie.
Jeez.
Despite that, he still considers this one of his top 3 roles of all time.
Well, he was amazing in it, so.
So, that's really all I have for the movie. I do have the history minute, of course.
Go for it.
Tyler's History Minute.
Going to the history minute.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a brutal few history minutes, so spoilers and warning.
Whew, okay, I'm ready.
Strap in. The first thing I wanted to talk about was the brutal lynching murder of Emmett Till, who is a 14-year-old black boy who was murdered. He was brutally beaten and shot and then thrown in a river.
Okay, can we talk about why you've put that in here so they don't just think you're talking about horrible things to make us all sad?
I will get to that in a moment. So he has become a standout in the civil rights movement because his mother chose to have an open casket so the world would have to see what they did.
Oh, okay.
The reason I bring it up is because the trial of the two men responsible is an instance of jury nullification, which jury nullification is basically going in a direction that is not supported by the evidence, either letting someone free or sending them to prison. So if you don't like that person and you think that they are a horrible person, even though they are probably innocent, you can theoretically still vote to send him a guilty verdict.
Yeah.
Or if they're guilty, even though you don't think that they deserve to go to prison, whether it was self-defense or there were some other circumstances where they're sympathetic, you can, even if they are 100% guilty, you can choose to let them go with an acquittal.
That's part of a jury.
So this is what happened in that case, where the two white men were acquitted, even though there was overwhelming eyewitness testimony from numerous different people about different time frames that all lined up. He was acquitted. They were acquitted in 1 hour and 5 minutes. And this is an instance of the horrible racism in Mississippi. One of the jurors was quoted as saying, "If we hadn't stopped to drink pop, it wouldn't have taken so long, or wouldn't have took so long."
That's just okay.
So the next thing they talk about this in the movie is the switchblade was illegal. This movie came out in 1957. The switchblade was actually made illegal in 1958. So they're a little bit ahead of themselves on that. So spring-loaded knives have been around since the mid-1800s, and they were made illegal in 1958, although there are now loopholes to that law. So a lot of spring-loaded knives are available, as long as they're not a push button. You just have to flick them open now. And so you wanted me to talk about the Woolworth Building, which was the tallest building in New York City from 1913 to 1930. So this movie was based in New York City.
Is that still around today?
I believe it is, yes. So they didn't set a specific location, so it could theoretically happen in any city, but they mentioned the Woolworth Building, they mentioned the Yankees tickets, the steps of the New York City courthouse. Right. So it is New York City, but they don't specify. And then lastly, another sad thing, I want to talk about the Omaha race riots and the lynching of Will Brown, which Henry Fonda was rumored to have witnessed when he was a child. So Will Brown was a black gentleman who was accused of raping a white woman, and he was in police custody when a mob broke out and lit the jail and the courthouse on fire and basically extorted the police and the mayor of Omaha to hand him over for murder. Otherwise, everyone involved in the entire building would have been burned alive because they were...
And this is before he was proven guilty, right?
He was just arrested and he had not even stood trial. And...
Because I can understand anger for rape, for sure. I don't think anybody deserves to die. I have a problem with...
But you have the right to have a trial.
Absolutely.
Even if it's a sham of a trial, you don't get pulled out into the streets. This is not...
And citizens do not have the right.
You don't have the right to be judge, jury, and executioner in this country. A lot of the world has that problem. I read an article not too long ago that there was an article where a judge died of a heart attack, but it came out just now that he died of stab wounds to the head, which is not a heart attack.
That's not even...
Well, yeah, so those are huge problems, and we need to overcome that in this country and then globally.
Absolutely, I agree.
So that's what I got, and I know it's sad.
Okay, so we are well over time, so I'm going to pick really quickly people...
Do we have 3?
We do.
Perfect.
Okay, so...
Audience asks.
Audience asks.
I'm going to Gidget Von LaRue. She commented a few times, but I was going to pick one. It says, if it was remade today, which, by the way, there is a remake in 1997 that I am actually curious to see, although I heard it was not as good. What changes would they make to appease the PC mob?
I mean, I don't know if they would necessarily have to make any changes because they don't specify anything. They vilify the prejudice and racism by shunning that person. They point out the holes in the argument. While it was made in the 50s and there were objectionable phrasing in this movie, it's not a movie that needs amending. They shouldn't have made a remake. They don't need a remake of this movie because how are you going to improve on this movie?
Right. Now, the only thing I would say that I would picture because of Ghostbusters would be that they would probably put women in the room because at the time that this movie was made, women generally were allowed to abstain from jury duty. I don't remember if it was because of like the home, like because they were taking care of the home or what it was, but they were allowed to say they didn't want to go. So having all male juries were very common back then, but that is not common now. Women cannot say, I'm taking care of children. Now, you can say other reasons, and there are loopholes and all of that, but you can't say that. So they might do that. They might have a few more women in the room. They might also have different makeup of ethnicities in the room because it was mostly white men.
It was entirely white people.
Right.
It was
hard to tell because it was black and white.
It's not really a jury of your peers if it's one small section of the population.
But it's only 12 people. So, anyway. So I like to always do one person that we have not talked about. And this is by multi-optioned.
Okay.
So it says, ultimately, the film is about individual jurors, their personal beliefs, and emotions. So she has a few questions. Are they willing to maintain their stand and opinion? How easily are they persuaded to change? But what about the verdict? Was he actually guilty or innocent, and did the death penalty influence them?
So I would say that it is entirely possible, if not probable, that the son committed the crime. Having said that, there was no way to prove premeditated murder.
Right, which they were talking about the first degree.
Which is first degree murder. There was no way to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, given the holes in the argument. So they have no choice to convict. They have to acquit him if they are following the rules set forth for reasonable doubt. I mean, I think that they did a much better job of accepting when they're wrong back then. So these days, you are going to hang on to your belief even if you're wrong, no matter what. And we see that in politics. We see that in everyday life, where you are wrong. Somebody is actually wrong, and they will not see reason because it's the old expression, never argue with an idiot, because they'll bring you down to their level and beat you with experience. Like, they cannot be made to see the right side. So they're better at that than we are.
Right. So the one thing I wanted to say about this was, one of the things they said, are they willing to maintain their stand and opinion, and how easily are they persuaded to change? I think one thing that is true of this movie, and is true in general, is while everyone came in with an opinion, they didn't all come in with an opinion for a reason. A lot of them came in, oh yeah, he did it because, like, it makes sense. But, like, they didn't have, like, a solid, like, thought out, like, solid whole plan of a reason. So it was easier to change their opinion because they didn't have a firm background on that opinion. So, and you're going to see that in other juries too, because people zone out. They don't want to be there. They just want to go to the Yankees game, like he said. Like, they have it's not their life. It's not affecting them any. So their stance is not that firm. It's not something close to them. It's not like asking somebody, did your mother do something? Okay, now somebody might put up a fight. That might be a different story. This is removed from them. So I think that's partly why you see people moving a little bit more, because it's not a personal thing to them, and not everybody was as invested as others.
Right.
So there's that. Now, death penalty. Do I think the death penalty motivated it? I think that it absolutely motivated taking a step back and thinking about this a little bit more, because there is a lot more weight to killing someone than there is putting them behind bars. I think because you always think about the fact that there's appeals, there's all these things and whatever. I mean, And when somebody gets put away for life, they do generally get out.
Yep.
So death penalty is very different. So I do think that motivated it, but they didn't talk about it a lot. So it wasn't the only motivator, but it had to have affected it. I know it would affect me.
Yeah.
For sure. So there's that. Do you want to get into ratings?
We have one more because you promised 3.
Did I promise 3?
You did promise 3 because last week was anemic at best.
Okay. Positivity Wolfie T said, would they have been less angry if there was working AC in the deliberation room?
Probably. Easiest to, like, obviously it was an uncomfortable circumstance. You don't ever go to the grocery store hungry because you'll buy everything.
Yeah, you learned that today.
You want to get out of a hot, miserable room as quickly as you can. Like, it was humid because it rained that day. Like, that would have been miserable.
Okay, absolutely. I mean, I think that was a good thing to add in there because
they're all suits.
It's common in these old courthouses. I don't know if it's common everywhere in the country. I'm learning that, we have older buildings than other places do. But in our state, most of the courthouses are very old, and if they have a working AC, it's like in one room, and most things are fans. Yeah. So, very real to life.
Yeah. Also, they're all wearing wool suits. Like, that would be awful.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. So, anyway, we have, holy crap, this might be our longest episode ever.
I don't know if this is our longest episode ever, but we are over time by a good margin.
Yeah.
So, ratings.
Reviews.
So, Rotten Tomatoes, the critic score is 100%.
Wow, is this our first perfect score?
It might be the first perfect score. Exactly perfect.
Wow.
The audience score is 97%.
Well, boo-hoo to you.
I'm going to not give it exactly perfect. It's a 9.9.
Wow.
Because I don't think any movie is exactly perfect, although this is basically as close as you can get.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually going to go a little bit lower than you. I was going to say 9.5. And the only reason I give points off is because it's not 100% accurate. You couldn't do that. It would be considered a mistrial, and that's just not, you can't do that. No. But I think it's a really great exercise in seeing all sides and not leading with bias. I think it's really important. I think actually right now, everyone should watch this because it's a really good exercise without the heated, passionate, like what's going on right now.
You need to be able to think critically and not just accept what is being told to you in all things, because then you're not some gullible person that can be tricked by the president, newspapers, a political person. Just, you are able to form your own decisions and make your own conclusions.
Right. I think it's really important. I think this is something that everyone should watch right now. So, that said, we are well over time and we need to wrap this all up. So, what is your rating officially? 9.9. 9.9. We're sticking there. Yep. Okay, so I'm at 9.5, and you said the audience was 9.7. So we're really close.
Yeah,
we're really close. Okay, so anyway, the next movie that we're doing, we've changed it up. We had a different movie on here. This is the audience recommend. We had a different one, but we decided we've gone too dark, and we need to pull it back. So. When we did Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, we asked you guys for a John Candy movie, and I think we gave you a bunch of choices. I don't remember all the choices, sorry. But the winner of that poll was Uncle Buck. So that is what we're going to do next week. Hopefully there is no darkness involving that, other than John Candy's passing. But we won't talk about that, because we've already talked about that.
You've already brought it down.
Yeah, we've already talked about that. So, anyway, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to an uplifting movie, because I need it. So that's it. If you want to talk to us outside the podcast, we are on Instagram, or not Instagram, Twitter. Why did I say Instagram? I don't know. But at Cinematically C and Blame Tyler CC, you can find us pretty much anywhere else. We do have an Instagram. If you'd like to find us there, you can. And thank you to Jake and Ass Music for our intro and outro music. And we'll be back next week with Uncle Buck.
Thank you all for listening.